As I get to talk to great Americans like Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, who still advises Congress and does a lot of other things that are obviously not public, but is just a super patriot who, back after 9/11, testified to Congress in private and then also in public about how there was a stand down to not kill bin Laden and a 9/11 stand down, basically. And Sybil Evans came out and backed up what he said. He went through a lot. They tried to prosecute him. That turned out to be false. He smiled through the whole thing. Never really complained. He's a best-selling author. And he, day one, along with our other sources, he didn't give us classified info, but he pointed us where to look. He got a lot of heat for that. He came out and exposed what really happened at Benghazi and what he said 4 years ago here on the broadcast turned out to be dead on. So we'll give you his website, his Twitter, his Facebook, and more. But he's just one of the visible patriots who ran the Army-wide program against al-Qaeda. He's one of the visible people, like an iceberg tip, out there in the different military groups and the different agencies that are patriots. And I've always said our government's our biggest problem and our best asset in that America's still there. Bill of Rights is still there. Good people are still there. It's special interests that have hijacked the country that are the problem. But on average, it's our military. I'm not lionizing them. It's just a fact. That is the most awake and aware of what's happening, and it's our military that said no to backing ISIS and al-Qaeda and has now basically forced a program to engage them, and they're being defeated. A lot of that's super secret, and it's very, very fluid. But we have seen the chairman of the Joint Chiefs come out and say we can put up a no-fly zone, but that'll cause World War III. So we've got a lot of jockeying going on with Obama and Hillary with the election 4 days out. I appreciate him coming on to tell us as much as he can that isn't classified off open source because I get really concerned that they might pull something as a distraction with this election. They've been saber rattling with Russia, who I know 4 years after he told us about it, Cy Hirsch, Pulitzer Prize winner, came out and was military to military, was the headline in the London Review of Books and the New Yorker magazine about how our military, it didn't engage in mutiny. It just ignored Obama and Hillary and just did not aid ISIS and al-Qaeda and gave Russia the intel. Obama was faced to get behind it after he was embarrassed. This is unprecedented. Talk about books should be written. No one really knows about this. So Colonel Shaffer has been at the heart of this from the beginning. He doesn't like to say that. He doesn't want the attention because they come after him. But again, he's one of those people like you talk about with Steve Pieczenik, Dr. Pieczenik, coming out and speaking out about the soft counter coup against the globalists trying to take over this country. So, my friend, good to have you on. I appreciate all you've done.
Oh, Alex, thank you for having me. It's good. Always an honor to speak to you. And look, you're spot on. I think there are patriots amongst us who are trying to do the best they can. And ironically, as you mentioned, regarding Able Danger, yes, those who served in the project have quietly gone back into service and are doing everything they can to protect the country. I'm one of those like they. I don't believe there's an expiration date on our oath of office. And I think once you take that oath, it's kind of a commitment to life and for life, and you've got to take it seriously. And to your point, I was over, since we last spoke, I was over in England at University of Warwick on a panel on something called Question Time, with Suzanne Evans, by the way, who's the spokesman for the Brexit movement. And one of the notable things about my visit there and about the whole Brexit situation is I think there's some deep parallels that resulted from the Brexit vote and the people of England saying enough is enough of this global idea and lack of accountability. We don't believe we should be ruled by people on the continent who are not accountable to our needs. So I'd like to believe that the very thing you said is that there's an effort for people to recognize that their freedoms, their ideals, the culture we live in, where we teach independent thought, independent action, but accountability of action is being lost in this larger attempt to establish essentially a global perspective on everything. And I think, again, the Brexit issue, the Brexit vote, went in the way of the independent-minded. And I think we are now facing a very similar set of choices between Ms. Clinton, who is clearly pro-open borders, pro-world government, lack of accountability. I mean, I don't know of anyone who's been less accountable in their entire life than Ms. Clinton, versus Donald Trump, who I think is actually, as someone who's actually had to be someone who's worked, who's developed, who's seen results from his own sweat equity, and has actually, his success is ingrained, is built into the landscape of New York, Washington, and America. So there's a very clear choice here to be made, and I think it's one the American people must make very carefully.
Now, looking at this, you obviously bucked the system early on to expose what happened and were able to survive it. Most can't. You were a trailblazer in that. Looking now, I was told a week before this latest FBI probe by a former high-level CIA operative, I'll just leave it at that, but even beyond that, even deep state, and they said, watch, it's going to be reopened. The FBI's in rebellion. We already knew that, but he said, watch, the next week it happened. He said, then watch what happens with the NYPD and with this whole situation with Weiner. It ties into Epstein, and I'm seeing it all happen. And quite frankly, I don't want to say it's frightening, but to really realize this isn't talk, this is a real move by patriots to let Hillary and the globalists know, look, you better watch out. We're going to bring everything out. And I'm told there's even worse stuff they're about to bring out. So I'm just wondering what these globalists that have hijacked the country are going to do when they're faced down by people that aren't scared of them and are basically calling their bluff. I mean, because this is just, what I'm told is there is a literal war going on inside the government right now. And people that told me this, I'm now seeing it manifest. I mean, it's confirmed.
Well, Alex, we talked about this in our last interview with my book talking about this very issue 4 years ago that it was coming. So, yeah, I think several groups, and I'm not unique. I mean, I'm one of the folks I think that picked up on this trend early, that there's a great deal of people who have recognized this slow boiling frog effect of the loss of our rights, this overabundance of taxation, this overabundance of control. And look, I don't know if your audience is aware of this. I actually have a degree in environmental studies. I'm one of the few conservatives who actually has taken the time to study what the left puts out regarding climate change and that sort of thing. And it's a complete grab of control. It's all about grabbing control, not saving humanity. So I think there's been a movement behind the scenes, both at the large level and the small level, of people who have taken the oath of office and are taking their responsibilities very seriously. So to your point regarding NYPD, regarding the Federal Bureau of Investigation's work, other things behind the scenes, there are a lot of people who know exactly what's going on. And Alex, this WikiLeaks thing, this ain't the Russians. I think people start, Judge Napolitano, my friend Judge Napolitano did a video, which I'll refer to you all to look at, where he talks about he believes that the source of all this is actually retired members of our own government.
Well, I've been told by William Binney 6 months ago, the former head of technical NSA, that he knows that's the case. Now the former British ambassador was at a meeting in the U.S. and was actually told who did it. So I mean, I know we don't want to actually let out who's done it, because I've talked to folks that actually know who, but let me bring this up, because and I'm not saying this because you were in the Army or in the Army, and the other services are great, but why is it over and over again the Army, in this whole internal deal, seems to be the main group resisting the globalist takeover? I mean, out of all the groups doing it, it does seem to be the Army and then also Defense Intelligence as a whole and General Flynn are at the heart of this resistance.
Well, I got to tell you, it's not just the Army. I think the Marines are behind this a lot more than people acknowledge. The Marines are a little bit smaller, and they're doing what they can. But
well, look at Smedley Butler, absolutely.
Right. So I think what we've seen here is that, let me speak philosophically for a moment. Warriors truly seek not to go to war. I think we are all very reluctant, especially those who have seen the havoc and death which comes both to innocent and guilty in war. And so I think all of us have recognized the need to try to forego and prevent conflict rather than embrace it. And once you've come to that as an understanding, you see politicians like Hillary Clinton, who are the first to try to use the military for purposes of political gain.
And then she makes jokes about it.
Absolutely. So I think you see both the brother in arms concept of all of us who have come through this trial by fire, working to establish work which I believe is in the best interest of the American people. I'm sorry, Ms. Clinton does not speak for the American people. She does not speak for working together. She actually works to be very divisive, very dismissive as well of the idea of doing the right thing for the American people. So I think you see this, it's like a tide of concern, a group of concerned veterans, concerned military officers who have always recognized it is our responsibility to defend the country. And let me say this in parallel. Both the Egyptian military and the Pakistani military have been essentially set aside and designed to be the protectors of those constitutions. The Egyptians, as we saw, have defended their government several times against the extremists. I mean, they removed President Morsi from power because he was.
And that's my next point. Why would Hillary and Obama, on record, and CNN all back the Muslim Brotherhood, that's basically Al-Qaeda light, to blow up hundreds of churches, to attack the government, to destroy their economy? Why would we remove our allies there? What is behind this?
Well, that's an excellent question. I just came out of a meeting. I'm literally in the same room I was in the meeting regarding the Muslim Brotherhood as being a primary topic. Look, the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization. I met with Egyptian Chief of Intelligence, General Al-Tohimi, on this back in 2013. And Alex, he made the point brilliantly that the Muslim Brotherhood is not simply an Egyptian problem, it is a global problem. And they are the underlying foundation for Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other extremist groups. They simply...
That's right. They're the recruiting and funding arm, and they're the main group, from my research, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the world expert. Aren't they the main group behind the invasion of Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. They are doing everything they can to destabilize central government. So when we recognize this, and when you see Ms. Clinton and Mr. Obama warming up to them, you need to ask the hard questions. We've asked these hard questions. Members of Congress, I deal with my friend Louis Gohmert all the time on this. Louis is completely correct in his assessment that there are issues that we have to defend and work that are literally...
Sure. Well, Colonel Shaffer, let's expand on that. I mean, Google brags that 5 years ago they helped quarterback with the intelligence, with the electronic signals, to manipulate and fund the Arab Spring and launch it. So who are the elements in our government, I know you know this, so I'd like you to talk about it, that are actually behind a Muslim Brotherhood takeover of the Middle East, allied with Saudi Arabia? What type of insane group does that?
One of the most insane things I know directly is that this guy named Jim Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, actually opened an office of outreach within the ODNI. Now, think about this, Alex. The office of the central office of our intelligence community opens an office of outreach to work with them. That's how insane this got. And Mike Flynn, our friend Mike, we've talked about this. Mike has publicly acknowledged that he was ordered to send arms into Syria to help arm the elements which were supposed to be resisting and helping remove President Assad from power. But it turned out that those arms went to Muslim Brotherhood and other elements which were the precursors of ISIS. So again, and Mike did not do this willingly. He did it as he was ordered to do it. So I think if you just simply, Alex, if you simply look at the facts without emotion, there's a very clear leaning and support by our government for an organization which we know to be terrorist related and declared a terrorist organization by multiple Middle Eastern countries.
And that was the breaking point 4 years ago for our military, as you said, across the board, the Marines, the Army, you name it. And out of that, now we see the overall resistance, the attempt to bring these people into our country. What is the point of bringing 5 million into Europe, hundreds of thousands into the U.S.? Hillary wants a 550% increase. Why would we bring in 80% military-age men from the most unstable places in the world?
Well, two reasons. I mean, she has said publicly, Ms. Clinton has said she really admires Angela Merkel. Well, what does that tell you? Ms. Merkel is responsible for destabilizing Germany, in a country that did not have the capacity. She brought in 1 million+ refugees, immigrants. I call them immigrants. This is actually a migration, Alex. This is yeah, exactly. And now Germany is destabilized. I mean, it is not the country it was just 3 years ago because of this onslaught. So what does that tell you? If Ms. Clinton is saying, I want to do the same thing as Angela Merkel has done, that's what she intends to do. She's not bluffing. She's not speaking politically.
Sure, so what is the end game of the socialists? They just have such a hatred for the West. They think, hey, it'll be fun. Let's bring in Europe-wide 5 million jihadis.
Well, that's what's going to happen. And it does two things. First, it then gives the government more authority to quote unquote do security. Oh my goodness, we are insecure. We have to protect you. So, Alex, it's a version of that disease where you injure your kids, and then you want to be the one who solves them. It's the
Munchausen by proxy.
Done at the international level. So what happens is you create this underclass who will always vote for you. These people come in, their gratitude is going to be with the party who brings them in, the Democrats. You then, by doing it, you create this permanent underclass, and then at the same time, you're creating chaos to the level that requires government intervention. It requires DHS to expand its powers. It requires the government to call for the federalization of local police forces. It actually does a number of things they seek to do.
Exactly. So the radical Muslim threat is real, but liberal governments are bringing them in as the false flag to then take control of the society. Now, I've been asking the questions. We've only got 5 minutes left. And Colonel Shaffer, you're the real expert on what's happening globally. What is your gut level, and what's the other intel you've got on this election? Trump's ahead in all the battlegrounds, the real polls. They're doing oversampling of 9 to 20 points, on average about 12 for Hillary. I mean, I'm not just saying this is wishful thinking. Looks like a landslide for Trump, even on the Electoral College. Democrats don't like her, but she's still confident. We've got evidence of election fraud coming in. What are your concerns about the election and other points?
There's been a study put forth the last couple of days about how there's only been 31 instances of people being caught voting illegally. Alex, that's completely a false premise. If people don't have IDs, how do you verify if there's been fraud or not? It's not possible. The reference group you're going to is not going to voluntarily tell you, yeah, I didn't have an ID and I voted twice. It's not possible to determine this.
Exactly. There's zero enforcement. The Democrats admit they want illegals to vote.
Exactly. So this is the other issue. So I think there's a great potential for that. My advice to your audience, use paper ballots. Make sure that you have a record, a hard copy record. I've been putting this out to everybody I talk to. Go the old-fashioned way until we can get the system fixed, because there's all sorts of electronic manipulation that can happen. There's been instances I've seen where people push a button and it votes for the candidate. So buyer beware. Secondly, regarding the trend, look, a lot of friends of mine who have followed election trends for a long time see this shaping up just like the Carter Reagan run in 1980. A lot of the same dynamics are now at play, and clearly Carter was seen as an establishment candidate. He was, and there was a big backlash against the establishment candidate. And clearly Trump is a big backlash against the establishment, which is, I think, overdue. So I think if things run the way I think others have predicted them, and I tend to agree with these views, I think we may be seeing 1980 all over again right now.
I agree. In the 4 minutes we've got left, I know you're not even trying to pitch your book, but let's go back to it. It came out a few years ago. I read it, where because I know you can't put, obviously, classified stuff in a nonfiction book. I'm not saying you did that with this book, but I tell you, wow, did it come true. How in the world did you write that book? Because 4 years ago, I mean, none of this was even on the radar for me, at least.
Well, there's two things. First, Alex, I saw, as many did, this rising Mexican nationalism, which was attempting to essentially say that, hey, there's no difference between America and Mexico. We should, and by the way, there's this thing called the Zapatistas, this movement that calls for the return of the southwest border states to Mexico.
Aslan.
I just thought that. Right. And so I saw that as a potential weak point within our own thinking, that people aren't thinking this thing through. But I see these immigrants, these migrants coming in, demonstrating that they have no respect for our culture, for our flag. And that was something I just noted as someone who studies trends and threats. So I put that together with some of what we've seen happen regarding this globalist attitude. A certain place that you visited, I watched with great amusement when I wrote the book, regarding meetings of the elites and having certain ideas of what they think is best. And you put that together with some of the other things that I know have gone on in other places. We turn it into a work of fiction. But with that said, everything in that book has elements of the truth embedded. It's just we've rearranged it for purposes of both good reading, but also as a warning. So that was why I wrote the book, Alex. I told you at the time, I think you were a bit skeptical, but I said, look, this is supposed to be a warning to the American people that there are things that could happen that they need to be aware of, and that was my interest. I don't have a lot of time to write fiction, as you know. I'm very busy doing real things. So when I write something, I tend to do it for purposes of informing, and frankly, you and I both know the best way to inform sometimes is to entertain. People
I agree. When I say skeptical, a few years ago when we talked about it, it's not that I didn't believe what you were saying was accurate. It's just it's so crazy that the elite run the U.S. and they run Europe. Why do they want to wreck it if they're already in charge? But they fundamentally don't like what it stands for. They want to mount the head on the wall. It's really a very, vandalistic, what do you call it psychologically?
I think it's something that they didn't create, and therefore they want to destroy for purposes of reestablishing it in their own image. I mean, it's a very ego-driven, very egocentric, dare I say, narcissistic point of view. This is why you see President Obama apologizing for the good America's done over the past 200 years. That's why you see Ms. Clinton saying that, hey, we're doing okay being number two. Really? Well, let me tell you something. As much as you and I agree, I don't believe in aggressive war. There are things we stand for as a nation, which is the gold standard.
Plus, they're the ones launching all the illegal wars that aren't right. They're the ones. Here's the deal. America's got a lot of problems, but you look at the history, we have been exceptional because of the liberty and freedom. We need to expand that. And so they sit, and then they're the ones that are the worst managers ever, and then they blame America for what they've done. It's incredible.
Right, absolutely. That's the point, is that they have gone there to do everything they can to diminish our role, our leadership, and frankly, being a guidepost or beacon of how to live. My close friend Bruce Fine has talked about how we should be an example we wish to help people emulate, not an example we wish to inflict on others. And this is where we differ with Hillary and the neocons, some of the other folks. They wish to go on and invade and somehow believe, going into Libya, removing Gaddafi you're going to see democracy spring forth. It's not possible. Any culture has to.
Plus, you can't make a deal with him, have him come in out of the dark, democratize, and then kill him. The dishonor is making the deal and setting him up. If you want to knock him out, do it. Don't make a deal and stab him in the back.
And that's exactly what happened. So this is one of those things I like to think we would agree upon. We as the Americans have a great society based on the fact that we have, as you said, what makes us exceptional is the fact we have individual liberty. We have the ability to think for ourselves. And I think that's what we should be seeking, to help others seek that for themselves and encouraging it. We cannot give it to them. That's right. We're
out of time. Thank you for the time. Tony-Shaffer.com. Find all his books online, Twitter, Facebook, and more. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.